Ευχαριστώ εκ μέρους όλης της ομάδας του iefimerida.gr που σχεδίασε και διοργάνωσε την απόψινή εκδήλωση. Θέλω όμως να πω ένα ειδικό μεγάλο ευχαριστώ στον Πρωθυπουργό Κυριάκο Μητσοτάκη, Δεν είναι σύνηθες ένας εν ενεργεία πρωθυπουργός να μπαίνει στη βάσανο του ζωντανού διαλόγου με μεγάλο διανοούμενο που είναι γνωστός για τις solid και μερικές φορές ανατρεπτικές απόψεις. Αυτό θέλει τόλμη, όχι μόνο γνώση. Ο Pascal Bruckner δεν είναι διάσημος μόνο για τα best seller του, όπως τα μαύρα φεγγάρια του έρωτα που έκανε ταινία ο Πολάνσκι, αλλά γιατί σήμερα γράφει και αρθρογραφεί για όλα τα καυτά ζητήματα της ταραγμένης εποχής μας. Τον λευκό άνθρωπο της Δύσης, το Ισλάμ, το μέλλον της Ευρώπης, την Ουκρανία, το Ισραήλ, τους μετανάστες, τη woke agenda. Πολλά από τα θέματα αυτά θα μπουν απόψε στο τραπέζι, σε μια συζήτηση που προβλέπεται ανατρεπτική και συναρπαστική. Τη συζήτηση θα συντονίσει η καθηγήτρια πολιτικής ανάλυσης, κυρία Λαμπρινή Ρόρη, την οποία και καλωσορίζω στο πάνελ. Καλωσορίζω τον Πρωθυπουργό Κυριάκο Μητσοτάκη να ανέβει στο πάνελ και τον Γάλλο στοχαστή και συγγραφέα Pascal Bruckner. Σας ευχαριστώ πολύ θερμά.
Good afternoon. My name is Lambrini Rori. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Athens. I conduct comparative research on political behavior, party politics, elections, and especially radicalism and political violence. I have the honor to moderate this very, very engaging discussion, I'm sure it will be, organized by the media outlet iefimerida, featuring the Prime Minister of Greece, Mr. Kyriakos Mitsotakis, and the world-renowned writer and philosopher Pascal Bruckner. Welcome to both of you. Without further ado, I would like to begin our conversation with the most significant recent event of our days, the American election result. The Republicans' decisive victory in the Senate and likely in the House of Representatives, along with their control of the Supreme Court, is set to usher in a new political era for America and possibly for other nations as well. I would like us to take a closer look at those results. Trump's success was characterized by shifts across nearly all socio-demographic groups, except for those aged over 65, and the white college-educated women who have moved towards the Democrats. Donald Trump increased his support among white, non-college-educated men and women, men overall, the black and Asian voters, especially the younger voters, but also the first-time voters, and achieved the highest share of Latino male support for a Republican presidential candidate in 50 years. He won all 7 swing states. So it is no longer an exaggeration to say that the Republicans under Donald Trump have become the party of the working class, while the Democrats have increasingly become the party of an educated elite of urban professionals. And when we examine the priorities of the American electorate, what we see is that there are very significant divides between Democrats and Republicans in a country where polarization has intensified in recent years. Similarly, racial resentment and grievances have become more prominent. Now, despite the inflation concerns, the American economy is yet currently performing extraordinarily well, and historically, we know that incumbent presidents are re-elected in strong economies. We also know how critical social media have been in recent years in fostering this polarization, but also for the spread of misinformation campaigns. Now, beyond those points of contention, my question is, what accounts for this electoral result, and how do you interpret these major shifts? Prime Minister, let us start by you.
Well, first of all, it's a real pleasure to be able to have this discussion. Thank you to iefimerida for organizing it. And I just finished one of your recent books, which I found interesting and provocative, and I'm sure that we'll be able to discuss some of the topics that you debate in it. Now, the American election, of course, is probably the most important event of 2024. In an electoral cycle where all incumbents have lost elections. So I think they should tell us something about the difficulties of dealing with the cost of living crisis, in spite of the fact that the headline figures of the U.S. economy have been rather positive. I see three issues of great importance. The first, it is the economy, stupid, and it was the economy in these elections as well. Because a lot of people felt that the cost of living crisis was just too important, too big to ignore. You look at GDP figures, but they don't tell the whole story. If you feel that you have difficulties making ends meet, whether it's mortgages, paying off your credit cards, or even being able to get through the month. And I'm afraid that the Democrats did not address this issue head on and were hiding behind the headline figures of the economy without understanding what they meant at the micro level. And I think this is a very good lesson for all of us, because at the end of the day, it is not the overall figures of GDP growth that make a difference. It is whether this GDP growth is translated into better wages, lower taxes, more disposable income. At least this is what we're trying to do in Greece. The second issue, which we cannot ignore, is immigration. Immigration played a huge role. Essentially, the whole border management system of the U.S. Collapsed during the Biden years, and there was this general impression also by many people that whoever dared to raise this question was considered to be inhumane and not considerate regarding the needs of the people who wanted to enter the U.S. So what started in its profound logic as a system to accommodate a few people fleeing war and persecution essentially became a carte blanche for anyone to enter into the U.S. And as much as the U.S. is a country of immigrants, this illegal migration was simply not tolerated by many people, including the legal migrants. Those people who entered the U.S. legally, who waited for many years to get their green card and their citizenship, felt that they were essentially cheated out of this complicated process by those who entered illegally. And of course, I don't think it was the main driver of the election, but issues of identity did play an important role. This sense by many people that the educated elites were only talking about issues related to culture and identity and not talking about their problems. Go back to the statement made by Hillary Clinton in 2016, referring to the deplorables. Who were the deplorables? The deplorables were people who felt that their voices are not being heard by the elites, who felt that their concerns were not being taken care of, who felt that the policymakers treated them with a degree of arrogance and distance. They were craving for respect, and respect is critical in politics. And those who treat people without respect simply because they may not have a college degree or because they may culturally think differently from those who populate the universities or the big cities, were in for a rude awakening. So if I were to prioritize the three issues, I think that were the drivers of the election: inflation, immigration, and an excessive focus on identity politics on the side of the Democrats.
Thank you. Mr. Bruckner?
Okay, so first of all, thank you for inviting me tonight. Yes, what you said, Mr. Mitsokakis, is true. We have to add also a few traits particular to Donald Trump. He made an excellent campaign. He broke all the codes, even the codes of politeness. He's a showman, as we don't have anywhere in the world. He can dance on stage. He insults his opponent, and I would like to stress on this fact. He called Kamala Harris a slut, a spitful, a bitch. He said that she made a career by giving head to powerful men on her knees. He said it literally. He called Africa and Haiti shitholes countries. So this is a language we don't use in Europe. Thank God, we still have principle. So one of the subliminal messages of Donald Trump to his voters is, with me, you can break all the limits of decency. If you vote for me, you will be able to insult your opponents, to trample upon them, to despise women, immigrants, Mexicans, whoever is against you. And the incredible result of this, that he won, as you said, he won. He got, I think, 30% of the Afro-American voices, 1/4 of Hispanics, and so we have to try to understand why it was such a massive success. On the opposite side, Kamala Harris was not very good. She was good for 2 months, August and September, and then she collapsed suddenly because first she had no motto. No, make America great again is good. Yes, we can is excellent. But the only thing that Kamala Harris found is that Trump is a fascist, which is absurd. I mean, I think the word is totally misplaced. So he remained at the center of the campaign all the time until the last day, and that was his force. And Kamala Harris made exactly the same campaign as Hillary Clinton few years before, by calling summoning the show business, which is a very bad idea. Never take any stars the next time you make a campaign. Stars are not good. And having Elon Musk on his side was a stroke of genius on Trump's in Trump's campaign. But now, it's not Elon Musk anymore. It's the great Elon Musk. So this shows a kind of megalomania. And the great Elon Musk reminds me the great healthman of Mao Zedong, the Danube of the South of Nicolae Ceausescu, the Balkan Lighthouse. When you start speaking like this of your collaborators, there is no limit to your own megalomania. So we'll speak later about the threats that Donald Trump poses to Europe, but I don't think Donald Trump might be a danger for Americans if he triggers a civil war. I'm not sure he will do that because he doesn't need to, because the Democrats are totally on their knees. But for the danger of the outside world, Russia, China, Turkey, Iran, North Korea, I think Donald Trump is like a scarecrow for kids. He talks a lot, but Donald Trump #2 is killed by Donald Trump #1. What did he do in his first term? Nothing. He didn't wage a war because he's a pacifist. He killed General Soleimani in Iran. Okay, he did that. But the Chinese, the Russians, the North Koreans, the Iranians, they say, okay, Trump, we saved. Nothing to risk about him. And I think that's a very interesting topic to talk about.
One quick point, which I think is important, which you raised. Energy. He's 78 years old, and he was giving 2 to 3 speeches a day, and these were 1-hour speeches. And his opponent was taking 3 days off to prepare for an interview. It doesn't work that way. If you do campaigns, You have to give that speech and the additional speech, and your voice has to be hoarse, and you really have to demonstrate that you actually want it. And I'm not sure that the younger candidate demonstrated that she wanted it more than the older candidate. And this projection of actually wanting to win was very, very clear when you saw him. And I was watching. It was surprising, because I think you're absolutely right about what happened during the last 2 months of the campaign. You know, I was watching CNN, which is not a pro-Trump network, and everything was dominated by Trump. Everything. I mean, he was there for the good things or the bad things he said, but he dominated the airwaves. And of course, he was gutsy enough to go to non-traditional media, to go to podcasts, to go to sort of media that normally, our protective media teams would tell us, don't go there, something could go wrong. So he was taking risks. But after all, if you speak the way he does, there are no risks, because you can say anything. So if you can say anything, nothing is risky. So he actually managed to carve out this niche for himself, and he ended up dominating the news cycle.
You're absolutely right. Just I want to add one thing. I have a friend who, when he's depressed, he looks at Trump's meeting and it cheers him up. So, oh my God. And Donald Trump will be 78, so it will be my age in 3 years. If I'm still in that shape, I would be very happy.
Okay, so Prime Minister, you mentioned identity politics as one of the 3 reasons that explain the electoral result. Increasingly, discussions about identity politics carry a negative connotation, yet there are significant differences in the 2 sides of the Atlantic. Whereas woke liberalism is predominant in the US academic environment, the woke framing of human rights remains marginal in Europe. Yet liberalism is a doctrine centered on respect for the equal dignity of individuals, upheld through a rule of law that protects their rights and through constitutional checks on the state's power to intervene those rights. One could argue that political correctness advocates for that. Pascal Bruckner, in your books, you have criticized the political correctness of our times, and frequently you have commented on the woke issues. This issue was also present in the public debate in Greece, especially after the Greek government passed a very significant bill legalizing same-sex marriage and adoption rights to same-sex couples. Now my question is, how have we reached a point where liberals are criticized for voicing their concerns for racial minorities, for immigrants, for sexual minorities, and any other vulnerable groups? So,
well, you may criticize, I did criticize wokeism, political correctness, third worldism 30 years ago. But I don't want to give up the message of the Enlightenment period. And the message of the Enlightenment period is emancipation of the oppressed, of the minority, of women. I think feminism is a key issue of our time. And even if some feminists have a radical speech or a crazy speech, we're not going to trample upon women and come back to something that would look like the Taliban's of the Iran regime of the mullahs. So that's why, of course, in France in 2014, I supported the same-sex marriage proposed by François Hollande. And why should I refuse that? Many of my friends are gay people married together, and I think a new right is legitimate when it doesn't take anything from my own rights. And the fact that gay people marry seems to me quite normal. And when you look at the figures, the rate of divorce of gay people is exactly the same as that of straight people. They have the same attitude, violence within couples, men and women, divorce, quarrels over who is keeping over the children or the dog, because sometimes, it's a dog. And so it didn't change anything to the society. We didn't plunge into chaos or anarchy. And I think this is the treasure of the West. we are a society which combines freedoms and order, and that's why Western society, in spite of what is said about them by outside tyrants, are so attractive to migrants. Migrants come in flocks in Europe, not only for money and social security, but also because they understand that they will enjoy freedoms they don't have at home.
Well, my kids are at American universities now, and I was studying in the U.S. 35 years ago. And there has been a clear change in terms of the public debate in U.S. universities. Not that these issues are necessarily new. Issues of political correctness, the limits to the right of free speech were discussed even when I was at university 35 years ago. I remember one of my professors, his name is Harvey C. Mansfield, very sort of powerful conservative thinker, said something in 1991 which is still very much relevant today. If you have the right to speak, you also have the duty to listen. And I'm afraid that this duty to listen has been lost in what we call U.S. woke culture, where groups seek to promote division, anger, and conflict, where speaking is not so much about making your argument, but it is about provoking the other. And that, for me, is very different from traditional liberalism. Essentially, it is the definition of illiberalism, where a minority is trying to impose its own will upon a majority. The tyranny of the majority was a concept promoted by John Stuart Mill in order to ensure that in democracies we have a framework that protects the right of minorities. Now we are at the other level. We have the tyranny of the minorities that do not allow anyone to question their opinion. And if you dare to question their opinion, you are labeled, a fascist, a patriarch, or, whatever else one can imagine. This woke culture does not exist in Europe. It certainly does not exist in Greece. And if it's up to me, I would never want it to exist in Greece. And one should never confuse the protection of fundamental human rights, which is a tenet of liberalism, with the direction that what we define as woke culture has taken in the U.S., where the debate has become so divisive that it is no longer a debate. We were talking, about class conflict during the years when, we were studying, Marxism. Now we talk about identity conflict, which is even more difficult to address and to try to forge a consensus. And sometimes, honestly, I wouldn't want to be, a young man at a U.S. university these days trying to date a girl. I would not want to do that, because I would have to sign a petition, or I would have to have my door open, or I would have, but this is the reality of what is happening in many U.S. Universities. Certainly, it's not happening in Europe, and I think Europe has a healthy balance between traditional liberalism, protecting rights, emancipating women. I think the fact that, for example, we talk about women participation in the workforce, which is a big issue in Greece, that we address issues such as, the Me Too movement, the right of women to actually speak in case that they are abused, which has been a big success of our policies, that they feel that they can trust the police and that they can call the police in case that they feel they're abused. But this is very far from what is currently happening in the liberal or the ultra-liberal bastions in the US. And I do understand why this extreme version of what I call illiberal wokeism is provoking, some reactions amongst people who just don't accept this approach.
As you know, wokism comes from France at the very beginning, in the 70s, from the University of Vincennes. So a few French philosophers were exported to the United States, were remixed in the American fashion, and re-exported to France. So we have a strong wokist movement in France. We're always 10 years late on the United States, but once a tendency has come in our country, it's very strong. And yes, which is, so wokism is a religion of universities, born on universities. It's a new brand of McCarthyism from the left, a mix of Protestant revival and McCarthyism. And the main motto is the movement called No Platform. That is, you have no right to speak. And when my daughter was in Wesleyan University in Connecticut, she begged me, "Dad, please don't come to my university to make a conference. You will shame me. You're too reactionary for these students." I said, "Okay, I promise I will refuse every invitation." And what you said, Mr. Mitsokakis, is totally true. So sexual liberation has become a nightmare for students. Because you have to, when you like someone, you have to write an application, yes to sex, but how much time, how many times, how long, which attitudes is allowed and which is not. And if it's not written down, you can file your partner and you can go to prison. So the history of American university is full of those legal conflicts which are totally insane. And now it's, even in France nowadays, you know, if you stare at a woman too long, she's allowed to call a policeman to say, "This man is committing an eye rape on me, so please ask him to stop or I will be obliged to file a complaint against him." But I thought that wokism had been repudiated by Kamala Harris during the Democratic Convention in August. In fact, it was not really formulated as such. And of course, Trump has capitalized on the tiredness, the fatigue of American people who want to maintain a certain form of traditions. But wokism is a disease of the mind, and there is worse than only the attitude between men and women. And first, wokism has replaced class struggle by race struggle, which is a regression to the 30s. You know, when I hear a few anti-racist militants, I think that I am in the Nuremberg Congress in 1936. It's exactly, people are judged by the color of the skin. If you're white, you're guilty. If you're not white, you're innocent. And what about the people who are neither white nor brown? What is a statue? And worse of that is also the negation of all biology. So you're not allowed to say anymore that you are a man or a woman. No, you're a person with a penis, you're a person with a uterus. And of course, if you deny this kind of formulation, you're a fascist, as you said, you're horrible. And I don't want to mention the very violent fight between radical lesbians and the trans movement, you know, who calls the radical lesbians trans-exclusionary radical feminists. They strike each other because transgender people try to go into jail for women, into cloakrooms for Olympic disciplines. So it has turned totally insane, and the society is upside down because of this movement. So we have to keep the best of feminism, anti-racism, protection of minorities, but wokism is a perversion of progressivism. We can remain progressive, but not with those people. Never.
And one more point. If people feel that a party talks too much about these issues, then the flip side is that you don't talk enough about the issues that one really cares about. And the number one issue that, you know, the traditional constituency of the Democratic Party cared about was inequality. But economic inequality, not racial inequality, not gender inequality. People were screaming, you know, in the focus groups, we have difficulty making ends meet. So don't talk to me about about these issues. They may be important for some people, but the focus of the debate was completely wrong. And the truth is that this was also very much exploited by the Republicans. You know, some of the ads that aired were very, very, I would never endorse them personally, but they were very powerful in terms of who represents who in this election. I very much agree with you. I think it is our obligation, and in Europe we have a very strong tradition of protection of human rights. It is enshrined, you know, in a European convention, and that is why I think it is important to ensure that one can talk about human rights, about the progressive agenda, without falling victim to the extremes that we've seen to a certain extent in France, but certainly in the US. And that's why I think it's wrong to talk about woke. Certainly in Greece, this debate simply does not exist. I mean, we're a country, for example, and look at things like the extremes of the US. On the one hand, we talk about wokeism, and on the other hand, we talk about banning abortion, which was one of the big topics. Well, Greece, you know, abortion has been legalized for many years. Reproductive rights are protected. So I think we have been good at, you know, balancing progress without falling into the temptation of a debate that is simply too polarizing. This, thank God, has not happened in Greece, and I don't think it will.
Okay, I would now like to ask what this resounding victory means for the state of contemporary democracies, especially considering the potential domino effect it may trigger in terms of voting behavior and party policies across the Atlantic. We know that voting habits and party policies travel transnationally. Research has shown in research findings that there is a far-right domino effect. So the rise and the mainstreaming of the far right in Western democracies aligns with the growing popularity of illiberal leaders worldwide in countries like Hungary, Venezuela, Russia, Turkey, etc. And the global indices also reveal a pattern of democratic backsliding since the beginning of the 2000s gradually. Meanwhile, in the Western liberal democracies, the elected governments are increasingly challenged in their ability to provide security, prosperity, and opportunities for significant portions of their electorates. And as anxieties and resentment over perceived or real declines in their social status grow, real inequalities within societies continue to rise. So, what is your diagnosis of what we are witnessing? Is it a structural issue, like a crisis of democracy? Is it an inevitable consequence of the globalization? Or is it simply a crisis of electoral representation and the link with the people? So, maybe we can start by you.
Okay, so 2 points. First of all, since 1989, Europe was living in the idea that the end of history had arrived. This is the thesis of Fukuyama, which he has taken from Hegel, and of course it was totally wrong, because the fall of the wall in 1989 was not the victory of democracy, it was the failure of the Soviet Union. And not even of communism, because nowadays 1 billion people still live under communist regime. China, Vietnam, Cuba, etc., etc., even if it's not a communist economy anymore. And this feeling of having won the victory, the war against communism, made us totally idle and reckless. And so we thought we had found the magic formula. Market economy, parliamentary system, prosperity was the key to happiness for the whole of humanity. And this dream has lasted for about 12, 15 years. And the first stroke in this fairy tale was, of course, 9/11. So suddenly we discovered that a huge part of the world didn't adhere to our values, that the Muslims were dissatisfied with our domination, that for them religion and the belief in God was a major fact, and so we had to take into consideration this problem. Second thing is Orange Revolution in Georgia and Ukraine, the invasion of Crimea in 2014, and of course the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. And I think one illusion of modern Europe, the main illusion in my view, is that peace is the normal state of humankind. But it's a total mistake. Peace is an exception. My generation has a chance to live 70 years without a war, but we are the blessed ones, you know. We are the happy ones in the 20th century. War is a normal state of human history since the beginning. And that's what the Chinese know, that's what the Russians know, that's what Muslim countries know. They settle their disputes through fights, and this is why the invasion of Ukraine took Europe by surprise. What? You invaded Ukraine? I remember Emmanuel Macron telling me, can you realize? Putin lied to me. He lied to me blatantly. He saw Putin, I think, 1 week before the invasion, and the other guy told him, no, I will not touch Ukraine, I swear, Emmanuel, I swear, yes, I'm your friend. And you know, Macron had forgotten the key of the Soviet system. They lie. We know they lie. They know that we know they lie. They keep lying. And nowadays they keep lying also. This was the basis of the communist system, and it's going on with Vladimir Putin. So, what lesson can we draw from this state of things? That the main problem in Europe, besides economic problem, which I think Mr. Mitsokakis will deal with more easily than I do, is we have no army. We're naked. We have no army. We have no military force, at the exception of 3 countries: Poland, which has nowadays the strongest army in Europe. 300,000 men can be mobilized. They buy weapons from the United States and South Korea. France, which has an atomic bomb, but Macron unfortunately said he wouldn't use it. So why do I have a bomb if it's not to use it? At least Putin is most straightforward. And England. But I don't know the state of the armed forces in Greece. I know we're working with you, and I'm very happy about that. But Spain, Italy, and Northern Europe, we need a strong army, because the invaders are all around us. We have enemies, and this is also another trait of Europe. We don't want to have enemies. We say no, we are not your enemies. We like you. If we will be nice to you, but you know, an enemy is designating you as an enemy. He hates you not for what you do, but for what you are. We are free countries, liberal countries. We believe in constitutional rights, and this is unbearable to dictatorship and tyrannies, whether it is in the name of religion, of God, for theocracy, or in the name of the Communist Party, or in the name of the greatness of Russia. So we've been very idle, we've been very reckless, and now the election of Trump, succeeding to the invasion of Ukraine, is like a wake-up call. The only thing I wish, let's listen to that wake-up call, and let's wake up all together, because all together we are very strong. Our enemies are very weak. That's also one thing we have to say. Russia, China are not in good condition. Russia is a deliquescent country where the life expectancy stops between 60 and 65 for men. The medical treatments are terrible. And now Putin is running out of soldiers. He's obliged to hire North Koreans. And we will, in my view, take advantage of this enrollment to get away to the West, to escape this horrible regime of Kim Jong-un. And China, as you know what we say about China, the Chinese will be old before being rich, because they have a huge demographic problem. So we are in trouble, but they are in a deep shit. And you know that rejoices me so much, my enemies are in trouble, and I hope they will remain in trouble for a long time, because I don't want to be living under the rule.
Thank you.
You asked a very broad question. Let me first start with the observation that governing these days has become an incredibly complex task. I'm not just referring to Greece. If you look at the challenges that we have to address in this extremely unpredictable world, economic inequality, managing different expectations, climate change, artificial intelligence. People expect a lot from their governments, and frequently when they feel that the governments don't deliver, they get angry, frustrated, and of course the populist voices are always there to promise them easy solutions to complicated tasks, and it is actually easy to be tempted by these sort of parties or these charismatic politicians. In Greece, we went through our own sort of populist reaction to what was happening before many other countries. That was in 2015 when we elected essentially the Syriza government. And the first thing that Syriza did was to partner with a party from the extreme right, just to prove that when it comes to populists, ideology is not that important. It is power and staying in power that is critical. And what has happened in many of those democracies that are sliding towards illiberal democracy is related to the fact that institutions get gradually undermined, which then give the possibility to a populist leader to win again, and the more he wins, the more he puts constraints on the constitutional checks and balances, the more he goes after the opposition, and then he can stay, because it's usually a he, not a she. When we talk about autocrats, I can think of only one woman in the world who can be deemed as an autocratic leader, and she is also no longer. She also lost her job. I'm referring to the leader of Bangladesh. So that is the way democracies are eroded. I mean, we managed to buckle the trend in Greece, but managing complicated tasks and delivering results is never easy. In Greece, we succeeded in winning a second election by an increased share of the vote, because we basically stuck to what we promised, and we didn't raise expectations too high, and we delivered on our fundamental electoral commitments. That's, I think, how you build fundamentally a relationship of trust. But moving to the big topics that you touched upon, and in particular the position of Europe in this very, very complicated world, there's no doubt in my mind that we have reached an inflection point where we need to wake up from our geopolitical and economic naivete. And this is essentially, this is a time to actually do it. When Donald Trump, back in 2017 or 18, I was not in power then, walked into this NATO meeting and called the countries one after the other, asking them if they were spending 2% of their GDP on defense, he was profound. He was fundamentally right in terms that it was very convenient for us to take advantage of this peace dividend, to spend 1% of GDP on defense, so to pretend to essentially have an army, because we had, the USA committing to our protection. And it was also very convenient for Germany, for example, to constantly export to China and to rely on very cheap Russian gas in order to ensure that its industry remained competitive. All these assumptions have been thrown out of the window now. All of them. So obviously we need a dramatic response. I'm sure you have read the Draghi report, but it is a very, very good document that essentially explains why Europe needs to do much more, but in order to do more, it also needs to have the means to do more. And I think the fundamental question going into the next European cycle will be, first of all, can we, agree to make these changes to ensure that the decisions taken at the European Council address, the main challenges that we face, and will we find the money to actually finance the big investment boom that we all recognize is necessary? Because if we believe that we can address climate change, maintain our social model, strengthen our defense, be leaders in artificial intelligence with the means that we have at our disposal, this is a fantasy. So we at least need to recognize in order to do all those things, we need structural changes, we need to mobilize private capital, we need what we call a capital markets union, which is the ability for European companies not to go to the US to raise capital, but to do it at the European level. We need to recognize that a company, you refer to Elon Musk, a company like Tesla would never have made it in Europe. It would never have made it in Europe because we essentially have 27 different regulatory regimes. We have a single market that doesn't really work, and we don't reward risk the way the US does in terms of the capital markets. And at the same time, we need to spend more as a European Union. We have the capacity to do so. We did so when we addressed the pandemic. I was part of these 5-day negotiations when we put together the Recovery and Resilience Fund. And I remember Angela Merkel at the time saying, no, this will never happen, because essentially what we did was to issue European debt, but we didn't call it exactly that way, until she realized that it was necessary to do so. And it has been incredibly successful. So we have the blueprint for raising funds at the European level, but we need to overcome internal differences, concepts of frugality as they are advocated by some of the northern countries, and to understand that we can only survive in this world if we are united. You're right, if Europe is united, we're a big market, we're a big firepower, we're the envy of the world. That's why people want to come to Europe. They want to live in Europe. I mean, they may bash Europe culturally, but they still want to come to Europe and live in Europe. But are we able to leverage all these strengths that we have collectively? And I think the next 5 years are going to be critical. I'm happy that the President of the Commission seems very much on board when it comes to this agenda. But it's also now up to the Council and to the Member States to support her and to make sure that some of the sort of bold recommendations that are present in the Draghi report actually materialize. Because so far, the progress that we have made is clearly not sufficient.
In this discussion about Europe, we also face significant demographic challenges in Europe, and at the same time, the citizens increasingly express backlash against immigration. They are driven by growing fears in multicultural societies and concerns over potential job losses to migrants. Now, the European governments, like Germany recently, they often adopt unilateral policies on immigration, partly in response to fears about the rise of the far right, even though many countries, they desperately need immigrant labor. What we also observe is that the anti-immigrant stances increase and prevail, especially in those countries that refuse to accept the burden sharing in immigration flows from Europe. For instance, France, in the past, it has not always supported the European solidarity and burden sharing in immigration. So my question is, what do those dynamics tell us about handling the immigration issue at large, but also about the European values and the so-called, by the European Commission, European way of life? Prime Minister?
I've been following the debate around immigration from the very beginning since we took over power in 2019. The previous government had an open door approach. Everyone is welcomed to Europe. It is our responsibility to save the world. But of course, eventually these people don't want to stay in Greece, so it was convenient for us to actually keep our borders open, because we were hoping that these people would end up somewhere else. And in my mind, it is very clear that this approach was a disaster. And I think that when Germany opened its borders in 2015, I think it created a cascade of events with which we are still dealing with. I think it has become the consensus at the European Council that we need to protect our external borders, that borders actually matter. I think you're right about that, that we don't live in a world without borders, and borders is what essentially defines us and what allows us at the end of the day to live together. My obligation as a Prime Minister of Greece is to protect the Greek border, which happens to be also the European border, and to do my best in order to ensure that people don't enter Greece illegally. And this is exactly what I'm doing, and I'm unapologetic about that. I've been unapologetic from the very beginning, whether it's our sea border or our land border. And initially, in 2020, when we started this policy, I mean, the sorts of things that were said about us, and I consider myself, a liberal, center-right politician, by, the radical, left in Europe, or by the so-called progressive media was, extremely harsh. But there is an understanding now that we cannot manage the migration problem unless we at least restrict the number of people who come, make it more difficult for people to come to Europe, because it will never be impossible for people to come to Europe. You can never completely create a European fortress, but you can send a signal to these desperate people: don't spend your money, don't give your money to smugglers, because at the end of the day, it's the smuggler business model that we're trying to break. And of course, this is not an easy task. It's a day-to-day difficult job. We need to work with transit countries. For example, in our case, we need to work with Turkey. We try to do our best. Our cooperation has improved, but we still have, some way to go when it comes to managing migration. At the same time that this is happening, we need to recognize that Europe is faced with a big demographic challenge, and we want to promote, family, friendly policies. We need to increase labor force participation, because even in Greece, which is a country which still has higher unemployment than the rest of Europe, we are faced with labor shortages, and there are various ways of addressing this problem. For example, one policy which has proven to be extremely successful is we now allow pensioners to work without any cut in their pension, which was what was happening before. And we realize that we actually have a lot of people who still want to work, and they actually fill jobs which other people are not willing to take. We need to increase the participation of women in the workforce. We need to increase the participation of handicapped people in the workforce. At the same time, there are jobs which we will have difficulties finding Greeks to do, for example, agricultural jobs, construction jobs. And the answer there is you have to do bilateral agreements with countries to offer people the long-term prospect to work in Greece, but you have to do it in a managed and in a controlled manner. So we need to determine who can come to Greece or who can come to Europe. This should not be determined by the smugglers, because this is exactly what happens. And of course, issues of integration are important. Integration policies are difficult. There have been successful examples, and there have been clearly unsuccessful examples, and I'm sure you can talk about that given the experience in France. Let me give you an example we don't talk a lot about, but which has been very, very successful in Greece. The story of Albanians moving to Greece during the 90s. These people came to Greece. They were, some of them were actually Greeks living in Albania. Others were Albanians who came in search of jobs. They ended up staying in Greece. Their kids were born in Greece. Their kids go to Greek school, and they're Greeks. And basically, they contributed to the growth of the economy, and there are always exceptions, but relatively well assimilated into Greek society. But of course, there are also other cases where we have to recognize in principle that people who are culturally completely different from us, even if we try very hard, we will have difficulties making them part of a society which, in case of Greece, is still relatively homogeneous. So the answer, in one sentence, is we need a big fence, but we also need a big enough door to allow people that we actually want to come to Europe, and we need to balance between the two. And this, at least, is what Greece has been trying to do.
Yes, this is dialectic between bridges and doors. So we need to build bridges between other countries and our countries, but also sometimes we need to close the door and say, no, not for you. In which concerns immigration, I think there are two sides. There's a humanitarian side. When a boat is sinking in the ocean, of course, our duty is to save men, women, and children. We cannot let them drown. And for years, for 20 years now, many humanitarian organizations pointed a finger at us. You criminals, your duty is to welcome all the misery of the world. Europe has committed so many crimes towards Africans, South Americans, Asians, that it should repent and take every child of Africa within its borders. So many philosophers have developed about this, but of course it's not sustainable. It's insane. It's an insane theory. As a result of this generosity is also a terrible selfishness. Where I live in Paris, in Le Marais, 5 minutes away from my home, I see camps of young Africans. You know, they've been attracted to France by false promises. So they sleep outside, they are in tents, they have no job, they're being taken by narco-traffickers, sometimes they fell into criminal networks, and so these false promises are a shame for our republic. So we have to promote legal immigration. People are working, they are learning our languages, they are learning our values. They know that they won't be able to carry in France the way of life they've had in their country of origin. But, you know, this is the price to pay. You want to be French? Do like the French. Don't try to promote excision, infibulation, polygamy, and all these kind of things. No, this is not the case. If you want to do that, go somewhere else. It's not for us. I will add that we in France, as in Great Britain, we have another problem. We have 7 or 8 million Muslims. So the challenge is this one. Will the Muslims, the French Muslim, abide to the rule of secularism, what we call laïcité, the separation of the church and the state, which has been established in 1905, or will they try to consider that the law of God is superior to the law of republic? So this is a conflict that is going on for now 30 years, and which is extremely strong and bloody, and it's not solved, far from it, but every week the French police and the French secret services diffuse a project of attack against us. So every month we have 2-3 plans of attacks by knife, by bombs, or by fire. And of course this places us in a difficult situation. But it's a challenge that we have to face. We cannot escape it. We cannot surrender. That's what I want to say. I'm very happy to welcome people from all confessions and all religions, and I'm sure there can be an Islam of the Enlightenment, because many Muslims all around the world want to get rid of the radicals. They want to live their religion peacefully, as we do. In France, you can believe or not believe. You can be a Catholic of the Sunday, a Jew of the Saturday. You can go to church or not go to church. But and many Muslims would like to enjoy this kind of freedom, you know. Make Ramadan or not make it. Marry a lady from another religion without forcing her to convert. These small differences are extremely important. But so immigration forces us to rethink our social system and our system of values. The answer of the left and the far left is we surrender. We don't have to force those people to follow our values. If they do what they want, it's because for them it's better. Freedom is our burden. Tradition is their glory. No, I think freedom must be everyone's lot. And that's explained why in France, young women coming from a Muslim family succeed much better than men. because, you know, they want to escape their families, they want to escape their father, their brother-in-law. And it is the same phenomenon in Arab countries. When you see the literacy rate, women are doing much better in Saudi Arabia, in countries like this, in Egypt, than men, because men are still imbued with their feeling of superiority, when women know that knowledge will set them free, will emancipate them. And this is a sign of hope, and I think that's why Europe is worth to defend to the core.
So I would now like us to move away from Europe and discuss a topic of big concern, the war between Israel and Palestine. The large-scale military operations carried out by Israel following the massive Hamas attack on October 7th, including the elimination of the top leaders of both Hamas and Hezbollah, may not destroy Hamas as an idea. In fact, this extensive operation will most probably further radicalize other young Arabs in the region and around the world. Israel is facing significant criticism from the global south, while anti-Semitism has surged once again. So is there a realistic way out of this bloody, vicious circle, Prime Minister?
Well, thank you for asking me a very easy question. Let me start by saying that Greece has a strategic partnership with Israel, and that what happened on October 7th was truly horrible, and Israel, in principle, had a right to defend itself. The flip side of the coin is that what has happened in Gaza, and what is still happening in Gaza, in my mind, is inexcusable in terms of the loss of innocent human lives. And it is a strategy that, to me, seems to meet no clear military target, because I'm always very concerned when I don't see the end game of a military intervention. And of course, we're all very much concerned about a possible, escalation of the war. It has, to a certain extent, happened already in Lebanon, and I do recognize that Iran is truly an existential threat for Israel, and Israel has a right to address this threat. So in my mind, there is a distinction between what is happening in Gaza and what may be happening in Israel's attempt to fight, other, proxy militias, in particular Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. At the end of the day, there is no other solution but for two people to share the same land. It may seem very difficult to get to that point right now, but I fundamentally believe that it is in the long-term interest of Israel to accept that this will be the end state of what needs to happen in this part of the world. And I think there are many Israelis who accept this as a fundamental premise. The problem is that every day that passes, this, what we call the two-state solution, seems more and more complicated. Not just because what is happening in Gaza, but also because what is happening in the West Bank, where the presence of violent, settlers in violation of international law risks, a fait accompli that is already very, very difficult to reverse. And of course, one needs to take into consideration the new U.S. approach towards Israel, and what may that mean towards a possible solution. For me, the first priority is to really stop right now the military activities in Gaza, but also in southern Lebanon, but in particular in Gaza, where I simply see no other military goal that needs to be achieved. After all, the top leadership of Hamas has been eliminated. And I was hoping that with the killing of Sinwar, that would give Israel a good reason to stop. Unfortunately, it hasn't happened.
Well, I totally agree with you. I think we should distinguish Gaza from Hezbollah and Iran. And I support the line by Mr. Gallant, former defense minister, who says that Netanyahu is waging a war without any goal. So what does he want to do? If he wants to please his extremists, Mr. Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, they will kick out all the Palestinians in the south to Egypt and in the west to Jordan. But neither Egypt nor Jordan wants them. They want them to stay in Gaza and Cisjordania. So it's a quagmire. It's a dead end. And I make a bet. I think Netanyahu should be suspicious about Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump, is a versatile friend, and he might stab him in the back. Donald Trump promised to the Palestinians to turn Gaza into a new Monaco. I don't know how he will do that, but he said it. He said it. Okay, let's take him at his word, and I think he might force the Israelis to stop waging the war in Gaza against Hamas, because Hamas is very weak nowadays. They have decapitated almost the whole military structure, and there is just a few brigades left, Hamas and Islamic Jihad. In which concerns Hezbollah, we have to remember that from 8 October 2023, Hezbollah has shot 8,500 rockets and missiles on Israel, and that 60,000 Israeli citizens cannot go back home in the north of Israel. And in which concerns Iran, that's a big issue. In my view, Donald Trump will never wage a war against Iran, never, for a simple reason. If you attack Iran, you destroy oil installation. So the price of the barrel raises to $200. Who is crazy enough if you're a businessman to do that? So Trump will try to appease the situation, will try to frighten the mullah, but I think Netanyahu is wrong to put all his confidence in the new president of the United States. Trump is a businessman, nothing but a businessman, as there is nothing he hates more than war. The motto of the Pentagon is no more boots on the ground, 0 fatalities in Vietnam. So the paradox of the United States is this one: they have the strongest army in the world, but they don't want to use it anymore. It's a part-time sheriff, but now it's going to be an absent sheriff is out. So there is a new sheriff in town, but guess what? He has no bullets in his gun, or the bullets are blank. Okay, so that's how he's going to protect us. This is the new data that we have to think about. So Trump might be paradoxically the guy who would solve better the Israelo-Palestinian problem than Biden and that Clinton and that Obama. And remember that when 5 years ago he drew a plan for a Palestinian state which everyone dismissed. He said, no, this is stupid, but it was not so bad. It was better than the present situation. So at least, even if I hate the guy, Mr. Trump might do something good for humankind and for the Middle East.
Okay, so it's an hour that we are discussing, and those topics are extremely interesting. I have a final question. I believe that the audience is very much interested to hear your opinions about the war in Ukraine. And we know that this was a shock to the European continent. We have felt it. It has marked the first time after the Second World War that we witnessed a direct challenge to borders within Europe. And all the Europeans have rallied strongly behind Ukraine in defense of its national sovereignty and the territorial integrity of the country. But 3 years later, there is a sense of Ukraine fatigue, also due to inflation linked to that conflict. So with Trump's recent victory, the question arises, how do we proceed?
How do we proceed?
mean, there is a scenario that we have, there are two ways. Either we keep supporting Ukraine through military means, or Ukraine will be encouraged to negotiate a territory for security deal. So, what do you believe will happen, should happen, and what would that mean for the stability of the European borders overall?
Well, I think in which concerns Ukraine, Donald Trump is not to be blamed. Only Joe Biden has been very soft on this. Joe Biden and Jack Sullivan, his security advisor. And when you go to Kiev nowadays, I've been 3 times during the war, they hate Jack Sullivan because they hold him responsible for what happens. Why? Because Americans gave enough weapons to the Ukrainians to defend themselves, but not to win. It was a kind of, they doomed Ukrainians to die of a slow death, and they're being hindered by those commandments. We give you missiles, but you cannot fire them far into Russian territory. So all those weapons are useless for the moment. And so Donald Trump shouldn't be the only one to be blamed. Biden has been too shy. And why? It's because what I said before, America remains traumatized by the lost wars of Afghanistan and Iraq. We have to remember first that Donald Trump set free 5,000 Taliban prisoners in Kabul in 2020, and then after came the debacle of Kabul by Joe Biden. So we have to hierarchize the responsibilities. But so there are 2 months left. You know what Donald Trump Jr. said to Zelensky? You have 38 days to use your allowance, and then we will take the money back, which is not extremely friendly. I think the Biden administration should take advantage of those 2 months to deliver a massive flow of weapons to the Ukrainians, to fix the borders, because obviously the Russians are winning. But we have to remember also that on the other side, the Russian economy is in tatters, and that Putin cannot mobilize new soldiers, Russian-born soldiers. So that's why he called North Koreans. So I think the two countries are exhausted, but of course the Ukrainians are suffering much more. If we give up in front of Putin, the fate of Europe will be very bad, because Putin, after Ukraine, Putin will try to put his hand on Moldavia, on Georgia, on Armenia. I was in Armenia 1 month ago, and they're very scared also of the protection of the Russian bear. And so if we stop the imperialistic ambition of Vladimir Putin, he will think it over between invading another country. So I've heard of a plan by Donald Trump. He wants to put European soldiers onto the 1,300 kilometers of borders, which means that we will sacrifice thousands of our young soldiers to protect the Ukrainian borders. Doesn't seem very realistic. I think the best way to secure Ukraine is to give this country the weapons necessary for its own safety, and then the Russian will think it over between attacking again. But I'm afraid it's a little late, and Ukraine is exhausted. And so I'm a little pessimistic on this issue, but remember that the polls said that if Ukraine were to fall into Russian hands, they would attack. Because the polls remember what does it mean to be the neighbor of Russia. Poland has been erased 5 times in history. So the Baltic countries, Poland, Romania, they don't want the Russian to tell. And so this is a big strategic problem to solve for us.
Any possible peace between Russia and Ukraine cannot be the result of Ukrainian capitulation. And of course, speaking about a Ukrainian victory may sound too optimistic. but it is very, very clear that at least we need to give Ukraine the possibility to defend itself and not to lose more territory. If one wants to be realistic, this is exactly what we're trying to achieve right now. And of course, I'm not so sure that the claims by the U.S. leadership that a deal can be done in 24 hours will actually materialize, because I think that President-elect Trump, soon President Trump, will also be wary of a possible deal that will result in Russia presenting this as a victory, because a victory for Russia is also a victory for China and for North Korea, which has actually sent troops to Ukraine. So I think in the framework of the new great rivalry between the US and China, I'm not sure that this is an outcome that will necessarily be acceptable to the new US president. So right now, our obligation has always been to help Ukraine defend itself, and of course we can provide material support. We have all done so, but providing soldiers is obviously something which is out of the question. To end the discussion on a more positive note, let us think how things looked for Ukraine one day after the Russians decided to invade. It was almost a given that they would be in Kiev in a couple of days, that they would probably occupy a big chunk of Ukraine, and that they would install a puppet regime. None of this has happened. Ukraine remains solidly, pro-Western, with a strong defense industry that will allow it to defend itself. Hopefully, once a peace has been agreed, and with a regime that clearly is not a Russian puppet regime. So, if you think what Putin's expectations were when he attacked, one could argue, yes, he has gained territory beyond what he was already indirectly controlling, but he has not achieved his main goals, and he must not achieve these goals. So we, at least in Europe, remain very much committed in the short term to ensure that things on the battleground at least don't get worse.
Can I say? Yes, I totally agree with you. Just a nuance which worries me is Trump's narcissism. You know what he said during his campaign about Kim Jong-un? He said, it's good to have a friend with a lot of atomic warheads. It's a strong friend. I'm sure he misses me. My God, the guy, Kim Jong-un, I'm sure he misses me. And in the first term of Trump presidency, there were adults in the room. I'm afraid now that the adults are gone. And so what will happen? What will correct Trump's will to power and crazy narcissism? And narcissism is a very strong historical passion among the dictators and leaders of the world. So I would reserve my prognostic. If I were Ukrainian, I would be a little concerned about Trump's intentions, but Zelensky very cleverly went to see him, shook hands with him, and said he was very confident that Trump would find a solution. But Trump also wants to give up South Korea. He said, you're too costly for me. No, okay. If the North Koreans want to invade you, you pay, or I let you down. The same with NATO. We have to remember that in a corner of our head.
Okay, so before closing our conversation, I would like to ask both of you to give us a final thought about these difficult times that we are living, but maybe with a more optimistic note, something, that you can say before closing this conversation. Well,
it's a difficult time, but it's also a beautiful challenge. Europe has strived for years and for decades to underestimate its own issue. As Prime Minister said, Europe never wanted to admit that its own security was due to the US troops and the US military umbrella. And now for the first time we face to reality. we're going to take a huge smack of reality. You know, as Mike Tyson said, when you have a plan, then somebody is going to punch your face. So we have a punch in our face, and we have to react. Either we lie down, and we say, okay, who is the next master of Europe? Or we stand up, and we decide that our future lies in our hands, and then no one will be free to decide in our place. I think it's very exciting, and we should not give up to pessimism and easy defeatism. Never.
Well, just one word. No. I'm a big student of history, and sometimes it's worthwhile thinking about the challenges that the previous generations actually faced. And at the time, I'm sure they seemed momentous, but they found a way to overcome them and build a better future for the next generations. And I'm also a firm believer that this is an inflection point for Europe, and that we will understand that the circumstances no longer allow us to be complacent. And I'm sure that this reality is sinking in also in the big European countries, and we certainly need to understand that only if we are united will we be able to leverage our strength in a world that is so rapidly changing. But I think the note of optimism is that we still live in a place that is the envy of the world, and somehow you land in any European capital and you're in Europe without really understanding. I mean, if you were to land in the US or in any other place, you would understand that you're not in Europe. And we have a rich tradition of overcoming difficulties in our continent. After all, we went through 2 world wars, and previous generations managed to build a better future. So let's look at history as a guide and allow us to be cautiously optimistic.
Thank you very much. Prime Minister, Mr. Bruckner, and all of you, thank you very much. And thank you for having followed this discussion. Goodbye.